So here's the MH-3 on the inside. We've taken the 3 screws out of the back, opened the case halves. We're going to pull this microphone in its little suspension out of here very carefully so we don't damage anything. And this cap here is the one that we're going to be replacing, this electrolytic. And we'll show you how we're going to do that in just a moment. So now we're going to take out the screws here which mount the board into the case. One of them goes right through the PTT switch here. Oops, right there. See if we can get a focus on this. There we go. So there are 4 screws. There's actually one behind here as well. And then we're going to pull this lever out over here and be careful you don't lose the little spring. All right. And now we're going to desolder the 2 points over here which hold that electrolytic cap in. Now when reinserting the 1 UF cap that I supply you, here be sure that you get the polarity correct. The negative is towards this short space right here. So the negative goes that side. That's actually marked on the board here. Actually, what does it say? It says mic negative, but that's a good indicator that the negative of the cap also goes to that side. Now on the mic element, you've got a red and blue wire, so we know what plus and minus is on the element. Sometimes I'll go ahead and take a red marker and mark the old element like that. And we're just going to go ahead and desolder these wires gingerly from this old element. It's larger, but it doesn't put out as much as the one I send. So here's that new element on the left, the old one on the right. I put the old one with its cap. We're going to just put that in storage for later, maybe. The new one, you can tell, has a plus and minus on it because one of the leads on the thing is surrounded with a little bit of insulation or a black piece of circuit board. The other one, the upper one, is the ground one. So I'm going to pre-tin those 2 little legs on there. Just add a touch of solder to them first to make the wires solder on more easily, and then I'm just going to tack solder those wires on. Once you've got the cap in place and the microphone mounted onto the wires, the new element here, you can go ahead and test the mic. Go ahead and plug it into the radio and be sure that it works at this point. Now, if it does work, I'm going to add a little hot glue right where the wires connect in back of the element first, and then take this piece of foam and wrap it around and around the element, and we'll push that back into the place where the old element went. What I suggest is covering the little piece of foam with some hot glue, and then that'll hold the element into its mount there. In reassembly, you may want to tilt the little blue electrolytic just over a little bit. It's a little bit tall, and it'll fit into the microphone better. There's 2 versions of the MH-3. This is the more modern version. It uses the SMD cap and not the electrolytic. Its microphone element actually has a plug-in connector over here, so no big difference. We're going to be changing that cap, and the positive side now is towards the outside instead of the negative on the electrolytic. The positive side is that way. We can unplug the microphone here carefully if you want to, if it makes it easier for you to work on, but of course we're just going to unsolder these wires, desolder this cap over here by putting the soldering tip across both connections, and a little bit of solder on the tip of the soldering gun, and sliding the cap off, and then putting another cap on here. Circuit board on the more modern version with the SMD yellow cap is harder to get out of the back of the shell. So you take a small screwdriver and pry around the edges just a little bit, give it a little pry, move it around, and all of a sudden it'll pop out because these up and down switches are rigidly connected to the board here. A technique to get the SMD cap off of the board is to go ahead and just heat one side of the SMD tab and use a pin and pry it up. Once you've got one side pried up, the other side can be heated up and then just pushed off the board. Well, there we go. I've just cut the lead short on the electrolytic cap, made sure the plus was to the outside, and tack soldered onto the 2 little pads there. Really easy. Just be sure your leads are, bent in so they match up on the pads. Tack solder it. Going up in this direction doesn't get in the way of anything in the microphone, so there we go. Easy thing to forget is to put that ferrite bead back on the microphone wire. You'll solder it up and have forgotten to put that on there. So slide that back on there before you solder your element up, and then you can mount it back in, add the blob of hot glue, and secure it in there and wait till it cools off.